Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Before we get into tonight's upload, I have an important announcement. A couple days ago, I shared some of my new ghost hunting equipment as well as some of my older stuff. And I had done a couple of ghost hunts in my apartment. The building that I live in is completely empty. It's just me and my daughter here. Downstairs is an empty office, which I'm probably going to do a ghost hunt down there in the near future as well. The building used to be part of the Underground Railroad, and it had actually one of the doctors who lived in the building prior to maybe in the 60s had a son who was severely handicapped, and the child passed away. Actually, my recording studio is his room and where he passed away. So I have some important news. It is now etched in stone that I will be doing my ghost hunt at the Conjuring House in Rhode Island. The house that is kind of the house that set it all up for the Conjuring kind of universe. The Perrin family lived there. Ed and Lorraine Warren went and tried to help them. And I'm going on the 24th at 6 p.m. till 8 a.m. to do a ghost hunt. I will be putting an upload up first thing in the morning on the 24th. And then when I get to probably the hotel room after the hunt, I will have a pre-recorded upload to put out on the 25th, and then go home and work diligently on putting together the video of my ghost hunt at the Conjuring House. I cannot believe that I have this opportunity. It's something that I've always wanted to do since I realized that it was a real home to go and investigate. Like I said, I'm going to a Paranormal-thon in October, which is hosted by Ed and Lorraine Warren's daughter and son-in-law, and I'm going to the museum. But I've got some other things lined up. I'm probably going to be going to the Lizzie Borden house soon here, coming up, and probably the Villisca Axe Murder House as well. So that's what I've got planned for us, but I just really etched in stone today the date for the Conjuring House, and I am very excited. But enough of that. That's down the road. Let's get into today. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you some videos and terrifying encounters. Let's start the evening off with a Dogman encounter. When I was a little girl, my grandfather lived in an old farmhouse in the upper end of Cleveland County, North Carolina. We used to go and visit him every Saturday, my dad, mom, and baby brother, along with myself, along with several of my dad's brothers and sisters and assorted children. we would congregate after lunch at my granddad's. Us cousins would play together outside and out in the woods, which ran behind the farm that stretched probably 10 miles to the dirt road, beyond which is an apple orchard and cattle pasture. It was the early 80s in a rural area, back when kids could take off to the woods for hours and it was okay. We would all have dinner together, then hang out until bedtime for us kids, when we would all head home. At the time I had just turned 8, my cousin Jay was 6. My brother and Jay's sister were both small toddlers, barely walking. The night in question, Jay and our little siblings were the only kids present. He and I had spent the day playing in the woods as usual and out in the yard where Jay was trying his new prized skateboard. After supper, we hung out in the back bedroom watching television until our parents informed us that it was time to go home. My grandfather's house had a glassed-in porch, which also served as a laundry room on the front, right outside the kitchen. This porch, because of the way the lot was laid out and the house was built, fairly tall, looking out the windows gave it a panoramic and slightly elevated view of the backyard. I would speculate that the porch windows were about 20 feet off the ground, and the backyard sloped away from the porch. The backyard was lit up by 2 large lights, one which was mounted on a pole to the left of the yard, the other mounted on the side of my grandfather's shop, which was to the right. They were very bright, and each light lit up a fairly large area. The only really shadowy part of the backyard was the area where the large tree stood, casting a shadow that fell between the shop and the greenhouse, which was to the far left of the yard. It was under this tree that Jay had left his skateboard when we stopped playing to eat dinner, and he and I decided we should go out and get it while our parents were still saying their goodbyes in the kitchen. This wolfman was in the backyard. We saw him at the same time as soon as we entered the porch. He was man-sized and looked exactly like a werewolf from Bad B movies. He had shaggy, dark brown wolfman head with long pointed ears and a light brown muzzle. His hands were human-like as best as I can remember, though they were covered in dark fur and had long claws. He was wearing what looked to be a red and black checkered flannel shirt and blue jeans. I don't remember anything about his feet, whether he had shoes or claws, but his legs were straight, like a person's, not bent backwards like a dog. He was walking back and forth in the yard, almost robotic-like, or as if he was on a track. I can't really describe it well. It was like his legs were moving a little, but not enough to actually count as walking. It was more like he was gliding, but in a jerky way. His body was human in portion, and he would move from the edge of the light near the greenhouse across to the light near the shop, stopping when he reached the end of the illuminated area and turning around in the strange jerky way and gliding back. His eyes were red and glowed some, like one of those laser lights that you would use to tease a cat. That color and about that level of brightness. The only time he was out of our sight was when he passed into the shadowed area of the tree. He seemed to be showing off for us, wanting us to see him, or at least that's what it felt like. The feeling that he carried with him was an overwhelming malevolence. I felt like he knew we were there and could see us watching and feel that we were afraid, and he was glad. Not sure if that makes any sense, but it was what I felt at the time, dread and fear, and like he was aware of us and doing what he was doing on purpose to scare us. Of course, we freaked out and started to scream for our parents, and of course, once they all rushed onto the porch, only to hear our hysterics about some wolfman in the backyard. They said the usual parent thing about overactive imagination and far too much Scooby-Doo. Even though he was there walking back and forth right in front of them, and we could both see him, none of the adults could. I remember pointing and saying, "It's right there," and being really frustrated because they couldn't see it. Finally, my dad, determined to put an end to this nonsense, announced that he was going out into the yard to get Jay's skateboard from under the tree. We tried to stop him, but he went anyway. At the time, the wolf man was still doing his strange gliding walk back and forth. When my dad opened the porch door and hit the steps that led from the porch to the yard, he triggered the motion sensor light, which was on the corner of the porch awning, lighting up the shadowed area underneath the tree. Just before this happened, the wolfman had stepped into that shadowed area and disappeared from view in the dark. When the light came on, lighting up the area, the wolfman was gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, as we say. We never saw him again, though we became mildly obsessed with werewolves for a while after that and started hoarding silver just in case we needed to make silver bullets. When you are a child, it's pretty amazing what you can consider normal. We were scared at the time it had happened, but it's like afterwards it didn't feel completely real because it was so bizarre, and we sort of made a game out of it. A few weird things happened to us in the woods after that, but nothing that could be considered paranormal beyond a doubt, and nothing like seeing this wolfman creature. Years have passed, and I wondered about what we saw that night. My cousin Jay forgot about it altogether. I asked about it a few months ago, and he didn't remember at all. What really brought it back to my memory was a story in Linda Godfrey's book, The Real Wolfman, about a girl who had seen a hitchhiking werewolf wearing clothes. Before that, I had never heard or seen a serious report of a canine humanoid wearing clothes. I don't often tell anyone about this wolfman we'd seen because it sounds so completely crazy. Of course, my parents and Jay's parents never for 1 second believed we had seen anything. I don't fully know the history of the land around my grandfather's. I know there were a lot of Native American in the area before colonial times, and that there were several strange formations in that part of the county that people claim were Indian mounds, though none of them seem to be officially recognized as such. There have been several Bigfoot flaps in that county as well, and there are black panther there. I have seen both black and tan panther, as my dad many hunters he knows, though they are not, in my opinion, anything supernatural, just regular animals. I have no idea to this day what we saw in that backyard. I find it hard to believe that it's actually a werewolf, but I feel like it was something paranormal. Seeing it caused me to have a lifelong interest in cryptozoology. Now, the incident about Linda Godfrey's in that book, that's not the only experience I have heard of. There was one where a person had seen a dogman or canine-like humanoid wearing clothes in a rail yard in Ohio. A few others, and I really can't explain them. I've really not had, I've thought about it, but I've never come up with a good conclusion of why. So with that, the only thing I can think is possibly some sort of shapeshifter or demonic spirit. I'm not really sure. But, that's what makes this field so amazing and interesting, is hearing experiences that we can't fit into that puzzle that we have created. So let's check out today's first video. Today's first video is absolutely terrifying to me. Two guys are standing outside, and one of the guys is pulled into the shadows by something. Not sure what, but it is terrifying. You can see him visibly just get ripped off and out of frame. I think possibly it may be some sort of crawler. I believe they live underground. I really honestly believe that Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dweller movie, was kind of a soft disclosure, and that the government knows these things dwell in sewers and other locales that are underground or away from natural light. But this is what I think it is. So check it out. That video clip is absolutely mind blowing. It's just, it makes no sense. The only thing that makes sense is that it doesn't make sense. If that makes sense, I don't even know. It definitely has a lot of supernatural, paranormal. I for one think it's possibly a crawler that yoked him right up and pulled him into the darkness, and he was lucky that he managed to escape and his friend didn't give up. On to tonight's second encounter. It was near the end of visiting my uncle near the border of Texas. My sister was sitting on the curb on the ground, probably chatting with her boyfriend on the phone. My brother sat casually on the truck bed of a truck. My dad was occupied with my uncle, and my mom was with his wife. I was not interested in joining them. In fact, I would have rather been on the merry-go-round that was in the backyard. It was a rusted, huge merry-go-round, but it was in well enough shape to do its job, concealed slightly by trees in the nearby dog pen which contained Dobermans and their whining puppies. I remember going on this thing like when I was 11, and now I'm 18. I hadn't been to this place in years. I walked towards it and slid my phone in the back of my pocket. I felt an eerie feeling as I was alone. I grabbed the metal bars and ran along the contraption. My shoes were digging into the red-tinted dirt. When I was content with the speed, I finally jumped on and sat at the edge, feeling the wind run over me and excitement. But as every turn made its way, I felt anxious, like I was being watched. But I wasn't being watched. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear any people in the neighboring trailers. But it was early. It was just quiet because of the wind. Even the puppies, who I heard whimpering much earlier, were dead silent. I started to hear things. I hopped off the ride, and I made my way back to the garage door and looked at my family. I only stayed for 2 minutes before being drawn back. It was much darker now. The sky had gone to a dark gray. I decided to play some music to ease myself, so I played a love song. It reminded me of a guy I liked, and it was a very happy tone. I started playing Cupid's Chokehold by Gym Class Heroes. I ignored the occasional crackling of the music, as the signal in the backyard wasn't great. As the song was brought to its end, I was aware of the silence. The music filled the silence, but not anymore. Not even the sound of a peacock was heard. I spun around more slowly and saw something. A grayish white tall figure duck behind some brush. I felt my anxiety rise like it was confirmed why I had that feeling of fear, and I was being watched. I watched. I heard the noise in the plants behind me, and finally a peacock in the distance started to squawk. I didn't spend any longer in that spot. I shoved the phone in my pocket and sprinted, ignoring sounds behind me and the peacock shrieking. I finally sat at the edge of the steps to the garage door, unable to see the merry-go-round from there. But I was able to see the Dobermans. I drew closer to them, and I noticed they backed off fearful. But they liked me earlier, even the mom Doberman. They jumped on the fence and licked my fingers earlier. But then the horrifying realization came. They weren't looking at me, it was behind me. I turned and saw nothing. I backed off to sit on the steps watching the dogs. Then I started texting a friend the whole ordeal. He told me that it was nothing, just some animal, even joking, saying it was probably the chupacabra. However, the guy I liked told me to be weary and to get away from there. I glanced over at the dogs, and the mother watched over me. I should have been heading back to the truck, but I felt something pull me near the merry-go-round, and I started walking closer. Now I was in a video call with my friend, one foot over the other, but I was hesitant. I wasn't sure if I wanted to listen to my friend and show him the merry-go-round. The sound of my mom's voice broke me from my trance, and I made my way back up to where my family was. Tonight's final video is one that I shared a while ago, but the clarity wasn't that great. Tonight's clarity is much better, and I believe it's out of Russia. And a father and son are in the woods, and they're walking through, and they come to kind of a hole in the ground where they see what can only be described as a crawler, and it is pretty terrifying. You guys decide. Definitely a crazy video. It looks real to me, but then again, CGI can make anything look real. Just the other day, a person sent me a picture of this creature and said that a neighbor of hers had said that this was lurking in their woods. And it was from a 1980s movie called At Walk or whatever. And I sent her proof that this was a picture of, from a movie. Unfortunately, things like that happen, and it confuses a lot of people. And it just stinks that people are willing to go that extra mile to, confuse the community. Or maybe it's almost to make us look even crazier than we already appear by believing and knowing. I shouldn't even say believing, knowing that these creatures exist. So, I'm not sure. I'm no expert, So, you guys make your decision. On to the next and final encounter. And tonight's final experience. I come from a family of hunters. It was not uncommon for my mom and stepdad to go out early in the morning and not come home well into the night on occasion. In rural Georgia, it was fairly common for landowners to lease out their acres for hunting to different folk depending on the season and the type of hunting they were doing. The deer season for archers begins at the end of summer. My mom has this story that I loved to hear as a child that as an adult had a horrifying twist. One afternoon, my parents struck out to hunt for the day. The land they leased that particular year ran alongside a power line route. These routes are clear cut through the woods and create a man-made field. A hunter can set their tree stands up in the thickets surrounding these fields and wait for grazing animals to come by. Around dusk, my mom started to look out for my stepdad to come and pick her up. He would usually help her get situated in her stand, then go and find his own setup further down the trail. As the sun began to set, she saw him walking down through the power line clearing. My stepdad is a brolic-type man that has a wide gait in his walk. He swings his arms a bit as he walks. It's kind of similar to a caveman to me. Even in the low sinking light, she could make out his silhouette and could see the zigzagging from side to side of the clear-cut field. He'd obviously forgotten where they had set her up and was trying to find her. So she stood up and waved her hands to get his attention. At that moment, the creature she thought was my stepdad noticed her. It dropped down onto all fours and darted into the woods, making a strange low growl as it did. She waited for what seemed like an eternity for my stepdad to come and get her. She was terrified in tears. This story shared many times in my childhood when I asked for a scary hunting story, and they have plenty of them. It's not that I didn't believe my mom, but we all know that night can play tricks on us and heighten our imaginations. So when I asked for this story in my teenage years, imagine my surprise when my stepdad spoke up. A man of few words and lack of imagination, raised his head at the dinner table. I've never told either of you this, but I think I probably should. That night, the creature wasn't running away from your mother. I was walking along the line of the woods towards her tree stand when I noticed it. I smelled it before I actually saw the thing. It had a pungent odor, almost skunk-like, and it seemed to be a little over 6 feet tall, covered in thick, coarse fur. It saw me about the same time as I was drawing back an arrow to take aim. At first it growled, then dropped on all fours and sprinted toward me as I released the arrow, knocking it in the arm. I was shaking and just missed the intended hit. This creature veered to the side and kept running. Alright guys, and that is today's second half. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. With that, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that, we call life.